Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
You're listening to Keeping It Queer with Naveen Narona.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Keeping It Queer. Today in the studio with me is someone who's really inspirational. They always say don't meet your heroes, but I'm glad I could meet Sridhar Rangayan today in the studio with me. Hello Sridhar, how are you?
Hi Naveen, how are you? It's been great to be here. I think it's what you're doing is inspirational, not what I do actually. I think this is
what
amazing.
You do is crazy amazing, okay? For all those of you who don't know who Sridhar is, he's a famous LGBT activist, a filmmaker, and he's done some crazy work, which we'll talk about in this podcast. So start off, before we go on and talk about your work, let's go to your early life, and I want to know how and where you were born and how was life for you in the early days.
I was born. I was born in a small town in south of India, which is like between Bangalore and Mysore. It's a small town, pretty much conservative, and born in a very traditional South Indian family, like Tambram, if you know the word. It's like Tamilian Brahmin, and they have their own quirks and kind of a very, their food is interesting, but their also mentality is very funny and very quirky. They have very kind of set patterns and very set notions.
And that's a weird trade-off, right, in India. Like if the community is that aggressive, the food is that amazing as well.
I don't know where the connection is, but that's sure. But that's where I was born, and when I was younger, obviously I was born in 1962, so it was really complicated because you had these feelings and you had these desires, and you don't know what it meant, and the only thing you would really kind of very chupke look up was the only book I would have is the medical anatomy book, where you would kind of look at a penis, and sometimes you just, oh God, this is what it is. But and
my textbook, I think by the time we came around to school, it was faded out. We just had the cross section of the penis, not even like the pictorial representation, just half of a penis. I'm like, this is not even turning me on at this point,
right?
Because they have scrotum written over there. I'm like, who called it scrotum? It's just disgusting.
And you would also look at things like words like semen and all, and you're trying to figure out. Of course, there was no reference at that point of time to anything to do with homosexuality and all. Not even any of the books or dictionaries anywhere. So it was really complicated. But one had these desires and one felt a certain attraction, and within my home, definitely one did kind of have a sexual interaction with my uncle and my cousins. So it's not that the uncle molested me or anything. It pretty much was, I think I was a person, though I was much younger, was actually... did the most of the advances, and it's a fact. I think it happens, and also I don't think you're doing it when you're a child. You're not doing it very consciously. You're just experimenting.
Exactly.
You just want to touch, you want to feel, you want to see what this is about, what you're feeling, and it obviously happens everything in the dark. Nobody speaks about it,
Correct.
So I don't think the conversation ever came up with my uncle or my cousin ever in the daytime. It would just happen in the night, and a lot of times everybody pretended that didn't happen.
Correct.
So it's kind of buried under the blanket kind of thing,
for real, literally another
really. So that was the earlier thing, and I think I always, I did have a crush on some of my classmates, and I actually went to a hostel in my 11th standard, so I was pretty much out of my house for a long time.
That always helps, getting away from
that totally helps, because
I like the point that you brought out right now, that you live in a nuclear family with your family. You have multiple people at your house.
Correct.
In an Indian society, that's the whole thing, right? You have your mom, dad, your cousins and everything, and then if you want to experiment sexually, where do you go? Because you have a surplus of people right there.
Right.
So that's where the experimentation begins, because you don't have the liberty to experiment, but you have all these people, then why not experiment?
And also when you have a kind of sexual contact with your cousins or something, it doesn't mean that they're gay. They're just having it in the night. And I as I said, two of my cousins are pretty much straight, and they actually are married. Of course, they went through this process with me in the night, but never talked about it, never went through. And we had multiple times. It's not like a one fleeting encounter. So when I went to the hostel, definitely it was a world opened up to me. I actually could smoke, drink. More importantly, the sexual aspect was one part of it, but this was more also that you have this freedom to be who you are.
What sex afterwards without the cigarette?
No, I didn't know it then, but I now. So it was you kind of started being yourself in many ways, So it was also an exploration of a wider world apart from the world I lived in,
True.
And also the exposure to both books and reading and people from different. I mean, I had a Malaysian friend in the same hostel,
Nice.
from the 10th and 11th standard, and it was interesting to kind of meet different people. And I think that's what I think it's important, perhaps, to have a worldview, not just of sexuality, but also worldview otherwise. And I think that really helps. And that's been my journey. So I've been kind of I studied 11th and 12th in Udupi, which is a small town, and then I actually went to engineering. So I did my engineering. I don't know what I'm doing in filmmaking now, but I did 5 years of my engineering. I'm an electrical engineering graduate.
Oh, nice. Me too. I'm electronics and telecom.
Wow. Okay.
What
cool.
am I doing with my life too?
No, you're still somewhere connected, I guess. Let's see. So I did 5 years of it because at that point of time, I think most of the parents wanted you to be a doctor or an engineer.
Yeah.
Period. Nothing else.
That carries on like for generations now. Yeah.
And especially a Tambram family, that's it. You can't think of anything else.
Correct.
I want to be a dentist, No, in fact, interestingly, what happens is some of the beaches there, whether in Udupi or Surathkal, where I studied, they had this space where actually people would just come in the late evening and things would happen. I mean, I've experienced that in Kerala also,
Correct.
Again, nothing is said, nothing is talked about as the dusk falls, as we call it, as the evening shadows lengthen.
It's a routine sort of,
So there has been a lot of explorations, and especially since I was in the hostel, we would actually kind of have these it was next to the beach, the college, the Surathkal college,
Nice.
and we would actually have parties in there with a bonfire and everything. We would get completely drunk and we'd pass out on the beach, and next day morning, like the way a blonde goes home, we would actually go back to the hostel.
The walk of shame, slut shame.
So it was quite interesting, my whole experience. And of course, even during those days, I was experimenting with sex, but I was not sure who I was and what I was.
Correct.
I was also dating a girl at a point of time, and she was madly in love with me, and I was we all had to go through this process that you are dating a girl. So I would give her gifts and cards and phone calls and the works. And then at a point of time when we went to a movie theater, she started wanting to hold my hand, I just felt completely uncomfortable. This is kind of beyond the border of what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then I actually told her that I'm not interested in it anymore. And she was pretty heartbroken.
Damn.
And interestingly, just to complete this particular story, I met her after almost like 10 years, She was married, and I went to her house, and then I told her, the reason I broke off at that point of time is because I was gay, and I couldn't tell you at that point of time. And she said, if you had told me, I would have still married you because I really love you.
Oh, wow.
And I just felt, I don't know how complicated that was,
But does she have kids now?
She has kids, and I am still friends with her and everybody. So, but interestingly, though, I broke off at that point of time, I still didn't know that this is the reason that I didn't even know there's something called a gay identity. I'm talking about 1970s,
Yeah, and we actually had the internet growing up, but back then there was nothing.
No, there was nothing. There was no internet, nothing. So we had no idea that there's a certain identity called gay, lesbian, transgender at all.
Correct.
So you're completely confused. Like, okay, you're feeling these desires, you want to have sex with men, but you don't know what to do with it,
Correct.
So,
and how to even act on it, because you don't know.
I didn't even know a single person who was gay. Even in the newspapers, absolutely there was silence. There was really nothing then. So only I think, when I came to IIT in 1984, when was that? 1994. I came to IIT.
Timeline is a little foggy at this point.
So I came to IIT in 1984 for doing my masters, and there was the interesting time of really being more open because, you would obviously be hanging out in the hostel, but you would also go into the big bad city of Bombay, and you would start exploring certain cruising places, which are supposed to be not the place you should go to.
Yeah.
But as a young boy, this is the places you fascinated.
And Bombay has a lot of them. There's no scarcity.
No,
of
in
that.
those days it was much more because I think some of the playgrounds, the stadiums and the playgrounds was pretty rife, and also most of the public toilets was a very, very rife area for cruising at that point of time.
Correct.
Now most of them are demolished, of course, but
Andheri station is still a big.
still the one.
Just go outside the McDonald's and they'll be like.
So there's one that Cooper actually had, there was one, and also Andheri station. This was funny. Just to recount some of those days, basically Andheri station had one loo on the west side of it, and one loo on the right east side of it. So you would actually see queens running between east to west across the bridge on Andheri, and you would find sometimes the same people across both the places, and it was a mad, crazy time. I mean, now to think of it, it sounds like, oh, what I was doing in that stinky place amidst the dirt and grime. I mean, but that was the way it was. And there was a certain of, I mean, if you read Raj Rao's books, it comes across very clearly the way, the kind of cruising and the kind of sexual relationship which happened in those spaces.
But that happens, I think it's also a subset of being, suppressed so much that you find a vent in something like, if, for example, if there's a room full of men who are all with their dicks outside, that's like paradise for you, even though no matter the smell, and you forget the scenario because nobody else would let you look at their penis anywhere else. That's the whole idea, that you are somewhere supposed to be like hidden, but this is the only place where you get to. So I think people usually just zone out from the smell and everything.
I know, but it's not that smell. Actually, they're called ammonia queens. Okay, so I mean, it's horrible, the word, but like they're called ammonia queens, and there was a whole subculture.
I want to make a hashtag trend out of this.
I know.
Hashtag ammonia queen.
So in these spaces, there was like those regulars who'd come, and it was really strange because, I mean, of course, a lot of them were married men who were bisexual or whatever you call them, and they would hang around there and in the darkness. And there was this one person called Ghee Queen. Okay, so
Ghee Queen.
So he would come in a dhoti.
Okay.
There, and actually he would apply ghee in his bum, and actually remove the dhoti and hang it somewhere, and he would get fucked by everybody in the loo, on and on and on. Now to think of it, at this point of time, you feel it's so unsafe.
Exactly.
I mean, it's so life-threatening to the way, but at that point of time, that's the way it went, and nobody would stop that person. I mean, now I would actually say, here is a condom,
Yeah.
So you would be thrown out of the loo.
And lube, please don't use ghee. I can't look at ghee the same now.
And the whole place would smell of ghee and so on. Anyway, so those were the days.
But I'm just curious, like, did he carry a jar of ghee as well? Because, like,
I don't know really. I've not seen
like, I would imagine the ghee would run out after the first.
So some of the things were really interesting, and of course, again, in the loo, I don't think anybody would follow outside and have a chat or talk. Very rarely ever. You know? So it would just be confined to that space.
Ma'am, thank you, Cam.
That's it. It's like that. So, but also it did, of course, was extremely unsafe in terms of the health. Of course, one part of it, but also extremely unsafe in terms of the police and the blackmailers who would come to the loo. So it was a bit of a scare, and we didn't actually at that point of time even have the idea of Section 377 in the mind. I mean, we knew it was just a taboo. I mean, basically a social taboo more than a legal taboo. That came much later. It's just that it was not okay. It was kind of, we also had this whole idea that it's perverse in our own minds. We knew, we felt that it was like a sin in some sense, because all this was handed down to us by the society.
Correct.
I mean, by families. Okay, this is sin, this is perverse, this is abnormal. And that actually kind of scarred a lot of us,
But there's a thrill to it as well. Like, when you break all those barriers.
Yeah, I mean, as a young person, you have the thrill, and that's why you would do that.
But then you also have to maintain that kind of sanity. Like, you don't want to be the ghee man, the ghee queen.
You're almost there. We don't know.
Yeah.
So the thing is, like, we were at the edge. Believe me, we were at the edge. We would also kind of, at least like me, I would actually also go looking for a lot of sexual encounters in very public places, because that's the only spaces you would have. So sometimes it would be a BST bus, for all you know.
Correct.
So, and that's right now looking at it, it's like a life which was really, really scary, but at that time it was adventurous. It was like, what can you do next,
Correct.
How do you push, the envelope in that sense, So that was like my 2 years of my master's in IIT was again had this double life where I would be the regular master's student in the class. And
what were you mastering in electronics?
No, I was actually switched completely to visual design.
Achha.
So I actually did my master's in visual communication. So that's where actually the interest in photography, I was always interested in the art, in terms of writing and painting, but that was a very formal education where I could actually learn graphic design, learn photography, learn filmmaking. It's a very rudimentary old low band camera which we got, and we got a small edit machine. So we are actually running around IIT with a camera, and everybody was like, wow.
So that was the first film bug you had?
Yeah, that was like a first film. I think the first, I remember like there was a 60-second film with 60 cuts you're supposed to do,
Oh, nice.
And that was like quite something. Like, okay. Yeah. So those were some of the earlier ideas of this one. Then I actually once I completed that course, I was supposed to go abroad. After my engineering, I was supposed to go abroad, and after my master's, I was supposed to go abroad. But somehow both the things didn't happen. My visa was rejected 4 times for whatever reason. I have no idea why. I think more to do with financial resources, that I didn't have enough because they felt that I'm going to migrate. So I was really looking forward to kind of going outside India, because also that would have given me a lot of exposure to just being who I want to be, instead of being in India. That was one of the things in the back of the mind. It was not really there.
Correct.
But the fact that it didn't happen, I didn't go abroad. Right now, reflecting back, I was wondering whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe I would have had a completely different life, but then I wouldn't be making the films I'm making.
Yeah.
Perhaps I would be, I was actually going for animation, so I'd be in a Disney studio, maybe doing animation.
True.
One of the 500 names in the end credits list,
I think what you said about wanting to travel to some other country is always there in the back of our mind. As an Indian gay individual, you always feel that we're not as safe as we should be in this country.
Correct.
Tomorrow, if we speak out, there'll be 1,000 people. Our own family might throw us out or kill us for that matter. You don't know. So I think we all have that thing, but I'm glad you stayed back in India. We are all glad Sridhar Rangayan is an Indian filmmaker, and we'll learn why after the break. We'll take a small break now, and we'll talk more about your career then.
Hey guys, this is Malika Singhania, co-founder of the blog Stylogram, where we cover trends, fashion forecasts, celebrity style, tips and tricks, and lots more cool stuff. So tune in every Thursday to the Stylogram podcast, your weekly style telegram, giving you the latest fashion and beauty stories that are relevant to you. You can also subscribe to our show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Audio Boom, or any other local podcast app. See you soon.
Welcome back to Keeping It Queer, everybody. We are talking to Sridhar Rangayan. As I already said, he's one of my favorite filmmakers in this country because he's the only one who tackles LGBT issues to his films, which is a rare topic to actually cover because as it is India में कोई बात नहीं करता. उसके ऊपर से you want to talk about that in a filmmaking aspect where it's like a very indie scene के बाहर. It's not even like independent filmmakers make films about depression and sadness, and then there's about being gay. So you said your early bug was at IIT where you started doing all these small projects for filmmaking. Then when did it actually blow up?
Actually, the thing is, what was interesting was, first of all, let me say that I'm not the only filmmaker who is making films on LGBT subjects. There are many of them, but I'm one of the few people who have been consistently making films on LGBT subjects. That's something I just want to say. Actually, as part of the course, as I said, there was a filmmaking, very rudimentary. Then, actually, after the master's at IIT, I actually joined a Hearing Impaired Institute, Institute for Hearing Impaired in Bandra. And I joined there as a mass media officer. So I was looking after all the publications. And that's when I made my first film, which is called Surmanthan, which is basically about a young boy who's hearing impaired and speech impaired. And how he fights with his family. Because the family doesn't, the father doesn't want him because he's hearing impaired. And how the mother protects him. And how he finally grows up to be a productive person of the society. So it is one of my earliest drama. It was called Surmanthan, and it had song and drama and the whole works with Ila Arun and KK Arena. It was a 40-minute film, and somehow interestingly, if you trace most of my further works, the seed of it comes right from that first film, because that's exactly the time where I was using drama and a sense of messaging, which is underneath,
Correct.
Which actually became the kind of projects which I would do further down, Though it was not intentional, but that's a kind of format I adopted for myself, which I actually call advertainment, which is advocacy and entertainment put together.
But it always helps to have a conscious effort of trying to make something. It's not just there for the sake of watching it, but you learn or understand.
Correct. No, actually the other way was, I would say, it was the other way. I had to pass a message, but what I used drama to pass that message on. I could have made a dry advocacy film, which is just information.
Preachy.
Yeah, but I just said okay, this is the way to, drama is the most easiest form in India, in Bollywood, the way we all look at it. And I think it's the most graspable and more emotionally connectable kind of format.
It's more accessible as well. People can.
So I started doing some of these films for the Hearing Impaired Institute, and also doing at the same time films for the Cancer Patients Aid Association.
Correct.
So in a similar way, I was using a drama along with the messaging in most of my work, which I was doing at that point of time itself. After that, I actually went to FTI for a short course, which is called a Film Appreciation course, which is like a 40-day intense period of where you're in Pune, where the Pune campus is completely empty because the students have on leave, and you actually
no one
have
to protest over there.
Yeah, no one to protest. And that's when actually
it's
you have
to make that joke, right?
So you had that entire campus to yourself, and you're watching amazing films from the world over, and you are being told what to look for these. It's a film appreciation course. And what was interesting also is I had gone to this along with my friend from IIT called Suhail. We were very close in IIT, and I'll come to him a little later, of course. But like Suhail basically was a graphic designer from JJ, and like he and me bonded really. We're a kind of a very small group of people at IIT, in the course, and we really bonded very well. And we both went to this FTI course together. So that was for me a good grounding. And also I joined Sai Paranjpe, who was a very well-known filmmaker, and I worked with her for 2 years on her television and film projects. That was a great learning experience because Sai Paranjpe is again a very independent filmmaker, very small team. So as an assistant director, you're actually hands-on on everything.
Correct. You get to deal with more stuff.
And also as I said, like her worldview of making cinema for the world,
Correct.
that actually percolated into what I was looking at. And I also then assisted Kalpana Lajmi, another very, very wonderful, brave filmmaker, and then Dev Benegal. So again, 3 independent filmmakers whom I assisted during that time. Almost like I spent around 5 years assisting these people, learning the ropes of cinema. What was interesting was from Sai, I learned humor. How do you see humor in everyday life? Her films are iconic in terms of very household, general, humor. And from Kalpana Lajmi, I learned a kind of a larger canvas of screenwriting. How do you make it large and dramatic? So we made a film called Dharmiya, which is about the transgender people. So I, myself and Sagar were part of that project, and it was amazing to kind of bring in a lot of perspective from the Hijra community into the film. Though a lot of it got chopped off because it's a mainstream Bollywood film finally at the end of the day. But it's still a lot of it retained. So these were some of the initial projects which I worked on. And hand in hand, what was happening also at the same time was I was becoming comfortable about my sexuality in a way with that underground loo and the parks and the works. But something momentous happened in 1990. Around this time was the fact that the first issue of Bombay Dost came out. Okay.
We already spoke about this before as well, because when there was nothing, there was Bombay Dost.
No, so Bombay Dost was 1990, the first issue, and Suhail, whom I just talked about, was one of the person who worked on the issue along with Ashok Rav Kavi. And he, I remember this is again, I was in Pune at this course, and he and Ashok came to, he was with me at the course, and Ashok came with the first copy of Bombay Dost, and Suhail showed it to me that I designed. He was also a designer, so he said, I designed this, I looked at it and it's like, why this? What is this nonsense? Why this gay magazine? It's really rubbish and horrible. And I was really extremely uncomfortable.
It's a culture shock, basically.
Yeah, for me it was like completely that it's on paper. It's there in front of you.
Yeah, everybody knows now.
Yeah, so I was really kind of this one. But then I kind of took one copy to my room, of course, and read through it, and I immediately understood the value of a magazine like that, So I think that's when the shift from the personal to the political, that what I'm feeling inside me is something being felt by a lot of people around the world, and it has a name, it has a movement attached to it. There's a reason for this to be so. And I think from the second issue of Bombay Dost, I was on board. I was a board member. I started editing, designing along with a team of people. And my house actually became the adda for doing this work, So it was exciting to kind of nosedive into a certain area which I didn't even expect. So my life has been kind of some of these turns which I've taken without me knowing it. And the turn has led to different other turns. And that's really interesting because, as I said, for a small town Tambram family, I would never imagine that I would be kind of editing Bombay Dost and actually co-founding Humsafar Trust in 1994. It's not even my dream because I was so uncomfortable with who I was, And I think the process was mainly, facilitated by having friends like Suhail, friends like Ashok, who made me comfortable in saying this is not something you need to be ashamed of. This is not something bad, It's just that happens that the society has a taboo. There's a legal issue about this, but it's something where. And what was, I think, most important also for me at that point of time is I met some of these friends who are not necessarily sexually interested in me. There were none of them are sexually interested in me. We met as friends.
That's true. That's a different because people always assume that just because they're two gay men, they'll always have sex, and that's not how it works.
Exactly.
And
so for me, that was absolutely fantastic a space to be in, where I had some of these wonderful friends who cared for me. I would go to their house or we would hang out together, and we were just friends, and we would talk and kind of look at men, talk about it, talk about what we felt inside, and it was a great place to be in. And also that at the same time, there's this place called Gokul's in south of
the world famous
Gokul's.
When you don't get seats at Leopold, you go to Gokul's.
Correct. But earlier at that point, but at that point of time, Gokul's, the inner section, there was an inner section earlier, which is completely occupied by a Queen's on Saturday night.
I've heard about this. It's a myth, and I was wondering if it's true, because I remember going to after like last year's Pride, we were all gone there.
Right.
So there was a bunch of Queens again on one table, and we were all chatting and talking about it. And somebody was randomly passing, like, back in the day, this was a big hub for all of us. And I'm like, no, it can't be, because given the area it is and given the kind of men who come
it
there.
was like, I would say like a very small area inside. It would, I think, have around 12 tables, and all the tables were filled with our community people, people who are newbies, people who are been there, have done and there was so much of table hopping. That is amazing. You would actually like somebody and you kind of somehow get an introduction to go and be that person, and it was singing and dancing on the table, and it was a wild party in that place, because that's the only place we could do anything,
Like you go to Bangalore, there's Chin Lung as well over there, which has, like,
I know.
The first floor.
That is crazy, that place, I know. It reminded me of Gokul, totally, that place,
And I had to go out and check that place when I went to...
I don't know, there's still so much out there.
There is.
But
Because
it's kind of watered down a bit,
Yeah, it's not that prominent, because I went there in the pre-evening time, and I had to do a double take. Are these really gay men? And I'm like, yeah, some of them are.
Yeah, no, that was a wild... I remember I've been to Bangalore also, but like this place was wild. And also then we would hang around there till almost like late night, and we would catch the last train,
from Churchgate,
and it was called the Queen's Express. Okay, because all of us would get into the train.
No 8x11 for you guys.
No, not that time.
That's again a myth which I've still to explore. And for anybody who's listening and doesn't know what an 8x11 is, it's by the way, like, Bombay local trains had 9 dabbas back in the day, like until the early 2000s, and the 8 coach middle door was reserved for gay people. That was a myth, and apparently, like, so it's either called 8x2 depending on what side you get on. If it's the Churchgate side, it's 8x2. If it's Virar side, it's 8x11.
2x11. Sorry, whatever. I don't know. But like the myth is not. It exists. It's very much true. It's very active. Okay, in some of the lines. Anyway, so
I'm learning so much right now.
So Queen's Express was where we occupied the entire dabba to ourselves, and we would actually be screaming and laughing and dancing. I mean, some of the Ramesh Menon and Edwin would dance in the thing, and even some of the straight people would be there, but we would just be ourselves, know. And interestingly, we never got into trouble. I have no idea how come. Okay, so we were pretty much out there. At
when you call the coach Queen's Express, you pretty much own it. Like,
totally, I guess. Yeah. So it was quite interesting and we really bonded, as I said. We formed friendships, which even now, kind of, we went to each other's houses. We had house parties. My house, as I said, was an adda. I mean, we would have parties at my house all the time. That particular, what was interesting about that is, of course, we had our parties, we had our Rona Dona, we had everything. But what was nice about it is, like, we had an alternate family.
That's true.
We were extremely comfortable with the set of around 15 people, and they were all age groups, right from somebody who's older to somebody who's just a newbie. And there's kind of I would say there was no hierarchy. There's mutual respect still for everybody, and you could pretty much share what you wanted to share, and you could bring people, your new friends, come there and be who you want to be. So it was interesting that there was absolutely, I don't think even at that point of time, even then there was no label like, oh, I'm gay. You are yourself, you are who you are, and
that's important as well, to not be bound by any of these things, by also having the freedom to be who you are.
Also, like, I mean, at that point of time, also one of the ideas was to protect each other. I mean, because they were scared. There have been blackmails. There have been police threats. The police have beaten up people. I've been through some of the really nasty incidents at the railway station at Loo, by the police, by blackmailers. So I paid my share of money to the blackmailers at that point of time. But at least here we could share that with each other, and if I fell into trouble, I would actually call somebody, and Ashok or Sohail or somebody would just come there and get me.
You have that support system.
That I think was very crucial at that point of time. And also we all decided that we need to go one step more than Bombay Dost. Just to kind of tell a little bit about Bombay Dost, we actually printed only around 500 copies or so. But the interesting point of each copy of Bombay Dost was read by at least around 100, 120 people, because you would never be able to stock that copy in your house,
Yeah.
So whenever you would go to anybody's house, you would pick up a Bombay Dost and you would read through that,
True.
And Bombay Dost has reached a prison in India, and I think it's gone abroad. It's really, what is interesting about it, like it reached sometimes a very small town in Arunachal Pradesh or something. Somebody would write to us from there, and that was extremely heartening, that like they felt that they're not alone, that they're connected to a set of people somewhere or the other,
And
they
that's
were not
beautiful.
me.
Like that's just having the ability to connect with someone from different. And I think most of the visual arts or visual mediums or print medium has this beautiful trigger power.
The thing is, when we did that, it was not because of any altruistic notion or because you want to be an activist or something. It's just that because you have been through the journey yourself. You're not an outsider.
Yeah,
you are not an outsider. You've been through the damn journey, having been alone in that small town in south of India.
Correct.
And you know that there are similar people somewhere else, and you don't want that person to go through the same complicated journey you went through by being beaten up or blackmailed and the whole works. So that's the only reason you feel that you want to say it, so that somebody else can somehow or the other understand the same thing. In fact, like I also would kind of demystify this whole idea of, I think, you have this Planet Romeo and Grinder, where you have all this wonderful buff bodies, and everybody's kind of airbrushed and everybody's looking good. Everybody's got this six pack and all.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one part of the gay subculture, but I think there's a lot more different parts of gay subculture. And I think what is happening is, like, sometimes the young people kind of look down upon the other stuff,
Yeah.
This is the only thing. I mean, I really think that a lot of diversity exists, even within the way we look at sex and sexuality and sexual intercourses. I really think we should be more broader in the way we understand and maybe not like or dislike or say, because I remember this whole big conversation which came up when somebody mentioned that there was loos where people would go and everybody said chi, tu and all. No, that is the way that went, because like, I mean, they didn't have homes.
Yeah.
Now you have a single income, you are working in a BPO, whatever, you have your place to live, or you're
Good
so
for you.
Yeah.
But then in context, you have to understand
But
that
people did
those,
not have spaces. I mean, there was no other way you could do that. I mean, we didn't even have telephones,
Yeah.
I mean, I think in my earlier days, I would give I didn't have a phone at home. I didn't have a cell phone. Those were not there, of course.
Yeah.
So I would give my office number, which is extremely dangerous.
It's crazy dangerous.
I mean, it's crazy dangerous, and that's how I got outed in my office at that point of time. So this was my journey from not being comfortable to Bombay Dost to Humsafar, and then being out at my workplace. Then I started also, like, I mean, one of the most key events in my life was a 1995 gay conference.
Okay.
It was the first ever conference held for gay men in India. Done by Humsafar Trust and NAS. Two organizations.
Foundation.
Yeah, NAS Foundation. Both of us got together, and it was the first ever thing. We never advertised about it. We had around, like, I think 150 people from India and diaspora coming in. It was a huge moment for us. We were also organizing it, but we were also kind of opening our eyes to this. So
but
people
without
from,
advertisement, how did you reach out
so
to them?
basically, no, this is the community is pretty much networked,
that's
pretty much
true.
networked.
Yeah.
So we knew somebody, and we had emails. I think emails had started by then. We were part of the email groups and stuff like that.
The internet boom. Of
Yeah,
the
so it
90s,
was just kind of coming in,
Yeah.
and so we did this particular conference, and there it was amazing to hear other people's stories. And actually have a more analytical political discussion, which was missing in our lives a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we were just like having the support group at Humsafar, but we are not having this broader understanding. So a lot of people who started the earliest movement in San Francisco, Tricon, or Kush in UK, they all came in.
Yeah.
And it was an emotional moment. I know that, like, how much we cried in the last day when we were holding hands, and because for so many gay men to come together to do a conference, and it was not advertised. We were worried about whether that time, I think Shiv Sena were really worried at that point of time, whether they will actually disrupt it in that way. But somehow or other we managed to do, like, it was like a 3-day conference. It was amazingly empowering, So a lot of young people also who are part of that conference are completely empowered, to be who they want to be. And that's the time when we all felt that there's no turning back now.
Yeah.
And this movement has to go on in some way or the other, with us, without us, and we all have to join hands to make this happen.
And you were at the forefront of the whole leading.
I was one of the volunteers. No, actually, yeah. I was one of the board members of Humsafar Trust, and we were actually people who were coordinating. But one of the most interesting thing about the conference, like, I mean, at the end of the conference, we actually had a press conference, So I think almost the very first time that there was a larger press conference, Some of us had spoken to the press individually, but here it was. So people were told that, like, you can sit there was like press will be here. You can sit this side in front of the press, or you can be sitting behind the press. Okay, you can choose whether you want to be out and be there. So I think a handful of the people actually sat in front, but the cutest was this young volunteer, okay, who could not still yet decide what to do. He wanted to be there. He had been charged up by this whole conference, and so he sits there in front of the cameras, in front of the press, with a scarf, with the goggles. That was the cutest thing. He wants to be there, but he didn't want to be seen or heard. So
the dilemma is real.
So that was interesting. So that, I think, kind of blew the lid for us in terms of the work we're doing. And also Humsafar at the same time was transitioning from being a gay support group, to actually opening its doors more to providing healthcare.
And activism.
And also at the same time, when we provided healthcare, we realized that transgender community is the most affected.
Definitely.
So we had an influx of transgender people who came to Humsafar to access services. And the entire, I would say, the whole route of Humsafar changed from being a gay support group to a more broad-based health-oriented system, which also I think was interesting because we actually moved away from an extremely English-oriented Western gay culture to a more broad-based Indian diversified language culture,
Correct.
And that, I think, that
really getting in touch with the whole
grassroots community as such, So that was quite interesting when that happened. And at the same time, also just kind of rewinding back, 1994, I met my partner for the first time. Okay, so that was like a momentous time just before the conference.
So how you all met and why you all met, we'll discuss in the part 2 of this episode. That was part 1 of this episode with Sridhar Rangayan. Because we spoke so much and we could only cover this much in this episode, we will have a part 2 for this as well. And in the part 2, we discuss more about Sridhar's personal life as well as how he used filmmaking as a means to fight homophobia in this country. So be sure to come back next week and check out part 2. Well, if you enjoyed the show, you can listen to more of it on any of the podcasting apps you like. You can look out for us on Audioboom, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, Beyond Pod. But if you're looking for us on the iTunes India store, you might have a bit of a trouble finding us because of the language used on the show. So be sure to change your location and then listen to us. For now, it's me, Naveen Narona, signing off. Goodbye. Thank you so much. And please continue keeping it queer. Hey man, just help me out, man. I need some podcast, man. I haven't had a fix in a week. Just need some.
Don't you worry about it. I got podcast galore for you, man. Just go to ivmpodcast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thanks, man. I'm gonna check it out.